All right, so welcome to 1.6. So we did the easier ones in 1.5, and now we're going to do the harder ones in the last lesson of this unit. There's always a review lesson at the end, but this is the last regular lesson in Unit 1. So as usual, you should be already able to do these problems. Those are opposites. Those are integer opposites. They're not fractions or decimals. These are decimal opposites. They have the same answer. So if 8 plus negative 1 is 7, what is 8.5 plus negative 1? Now we didn't do this in the last lesson, but look right next to it. You can figure it out. Right? It has to be positive 7.5, right? If 8 plus negative 1 is 7, 8.5 or 8.5 plus negative 1 must be 7.5. Now, if you can't do it in your head, right, you're lining up your decimal points, but there are 7.5 extra negatives. Try the next two. Number 5 is a hint for number 6. Warm-up works like that many days. So this one must be negative 4, right? There's 4 extra negatives. So this one must be negative 4.3. There's 4.3 extra negatives, right? 6.3 minus 2, we're lining up our decimal points, is 4.3. But there are more of the negatives, so it's 4.3 negatives. So if you understood this down here, you already can do today's lesson. But let's go through the whole thing. So we're going to go over profit today. Companies do not always make a profit. What's the opposite of profit? Well, it's called a loss. Say you buy a car for $21,000 and sell it for $20,000, right? You sold it for less than you bought it for. Well, you had a loss of $1,000. Another way to say a loss of $1,000 is negative $1,000. And so the opposite of profit, which every company is trying to make, is loss. And we'll get to that at the end of the lesson. Right, so all these notes are telling you, and again, you can take the notes down word for word, but you can short them in your own words. That's totally allowed. So we still need to cancel and count the extra. So now, this day, some students struggle. Now, if you're struggling, just forget about the decimal part, right? Negative 5 plus 6, hopefully everyone knows that's 1, right? So this answer must be close to 1, right? And what it is there are 1.19 or 1 and 1900ths extra positives. Now the math, right? You're going to put the bigger number up top, right? And find out there are 1.19 extra positives there. Now, what this technically is, and if you open a textbook, it will say, all right, the number with the greater absolute value, the number, you learned absolute value in 6th grade, right? The number, right, the absolute value of negative 6 is 6. The absolute value of 6 is also 6. The number with the greater absolute value always goes up top. So the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. The absolute value of 6 is 6. So the one with the greater absolute value always goes up top in subtraction. It has nothing to do with which one's positive or negative. All right, so this one. So we have, that's around, well, we should round that to 8, right? Because 0.9 goes up to 8, right? So 8 plus negative 2 is 6. So this answer has to be around positive 6. So what is it? Well, it's 5.9. Why is that? Because 7.9 minus 2 is 5.9. There are 5.9 extra positives there. Try that one. This one's a little harder. So negative 8 plus 4, right? I'm doing it as integers, is negative 4. So we know this answer is negative. It's around negative 4. Now this is harder. If you try this one in your head, you may have made a mistake. And the reason it's hard to do this one in your head is that subtracting when there's regrouping or borrowing in your head often leads to mistakes. Even Mr. Ben makes mistakes when he's trying to regroup in his head. I tend to write them down. So you borrow, 12 minus 3 is 9, 7 minus 4 is 3. And so, yeah, it's around negative 4. It's negative 3.9. There are 3.9 extra negatives there. Right? This is around 9 plus negative 3, which is 6. So this answer better be around positive 6. Well, there are 9 positives and 3.4 negatives. Once again, a problem with borrowing in it. And this is exactly positive 5.6. Okay, so notice in these problems, you ended up subtracting the two numbers and putting the one with the greater absolute value up top. That is the pattern today. We avoided those yesterday because they tend to be the trickier ones. We're doing them today. All right, so try this, add the opposite. So we're adding the opposite of that, 2.03. So the one with the greater absolute value is that one. And so this is negative 3.34, or negative 3 34/100ths. Subtraction, we are always changing to add the opposite. The one with greater absolute value is 5.3, so it goes up top when we subtract. And that becomes a 4. So we get 0.5. And some teachers are going to be really hyper about you writing that 0. I am not hyper about it at all. That is negative 0.5 or negative 5/10. Okay, that is called the leading 0. I am not as hyper as other teachers about that. Just though, the reason they're hyper about it is they're afraid you're going to make this decimal point small and no one's going to see it. Okay, and they often use the example of pharmacists prescribing the wrong amount of medicine. But you could also just make your decimal points nice and big and everyone knows it's 0.5, all right, negative 0.5 or negative 5/10. Adding the opposite, bigger absolute value is 9.2. Again, the 4 goes under the 9, right? And so there, again, there are 5.2 or 5 2/10 extra negatives. All right, if Stuart has $46.50, that's a positive. If he owes $50.75, that's a negative. So this is the problem we're doing. All right, so he owes more money than he has. And one of the secrets I should have said already for any problem is that if you know the answer is negative, you might want to throw that negative wherever you're planning to put the answer. Because once you go over here and do that, some students forget that the answer is negative, right? Because you do this subtraction, you put the bigger absolute value number up top, you borrow there and get a 4, and so it looks like it's $4.25, but in fact, how much money does he really have? He really owes $4.25, or negative $4.25 is what he really has. All right, so finally we're talking about profit. All right, so Lisa bought a chair for $32 and sold it for more. All right, so she sold it for more. So it's to find a profit. Let's write something out. So it says profit. The profit is you subtract the cost to buy it from the sale price. So whatever you sold it for, let's put sold, I guess, instead of sale. You sold it for minus what you bought it for is the profit. Okay? So this problem is we sold it for $58.75 and we bought it for $32. That's the subtraction we're doing. So we're going to line up our decimal points. and we made a profit of $26.75. But that's an elementary school problem. Well, it has decimals in it, but a later elementary school problem. But let's look at this one. Paul bought a painting for $65.30 and sold it for $60.42. So they sold it for less than they bought it for. So we're going to get a negative answer here. They sold it for less. So when we do this math, right, we still have to put the bigger absolute value up front, up top, right, which is why this is a little confusing, right? So we still have to borrow here, and we get a 0 there. So can't take 4 from 0 and put 4. We have to borrow again, and we get a 6 there. And so we didn't make $4.68. I feel like I should have, I did something wrong. Yeah, I did. I can see in my math. I'm going to fix it right now. For those of you who are thinking in your mind, what did Mr. Ben do? This is 10. This is a 2, right? Did I do wrong? It's 8. So this is 12. This is 8. Is that what I said before? I don't think so. I think I made a mistake. All right, so we borrowed from there, and it's $4.88. Okay, but it's negative $4.88, right? So what was his profit? It was less than 0, negative $4.88, or you could alternatively have written this as a $4.88 loss. Okay, when you sell something for less than you bought it for or made it. All right. So here's our rounding again. Use your powers of rounding to pick the answer closest. I don't want you to do all the work. So this is around 13. That's around negative 7. Right? Don't look at that. That goes up to negative 7. 13 plus negative 7 is 6. And so 6 is closest to the exact answer. All right, this is a little tricky. Try it. Well, negative 4 plus blank equals negative 7. Let's round that to 7. Well, this would be around negative 3, right? So this better be around negative 3. Let's see what it is. Again, we're going to put the one with the bigger absolute value, 6.9, up top. And I'm going to get around negative. The question mark must have been not 2.6, but negative 2.6. Right? And if you're ever nervous about these, just write them out. Negative 4.3 plus negative 2.6, right, is exactly negative 6.9. It checks out. So here's our practice. Do them all before I put up the answers. Right, because 13.6 minus 12 is 1.6, but there's extra negatives. Negative 13.9. Positive 16.1. They're extra positives. Here you are adding the opposite. So notice on every problem in the homework today, you're going to be doing some version of subtraction. In yesterday's homework, you did some version of addition every time. And this is negative 9.8 because there are more of the negatives. That was a perfect example of one where you should have put negative and then gone and gotten the 9.8. On tests, I get positive 9.8 for problems like that all the time. Be careful. So this is the same as 5 plus negative 7.8. There are 2.8 extra negatives there. So she was paid $72.23, but she spent $90 on parts and supplies. right? What she sold it for minus what she bought it for, or in this case, what she spent on making the work, is your profit. So this is 72.23 minus 90. Well, that's $70.23 minus $90. So we put the bigger absolute value up top. We're going to line up our decimal points. All right, now I want you to do that subtraction before me, because a lot of students mess it up. That becomes an 8. You cannot come over here and make a 10, right? You have to make that 10, cross it out, make it a 9. Make that 10, cross it out, make it a 9. Now you get the 10 over there, right? When you borrow, you can go one place value at a time. 10 minus 3 is 7. 9 minus 2 is 7. 9 minus decimal straight down. 9 minus 2 is 7. 8 minus 7 is 1. And we had a profit of negative $17.77, or a loss of $17.70, because she spent more on parts and supplies than she was paid. There's that approximate symbol. We're adding the opposite here, so adding, right, negative 9.437. So we're adding about negative 9. And so this is approximately, right, approximately negative 709. Thank you.